of asset management webinars that WSP has been undertaking. And I'll be talking to you this afternoon or evening or morning, depending where you are in the world, about asset management, making asset management documents future ready. And really, I want to welcome you all from all parts of the world. We have delegates from Canada, America, UK and Asia. And I guess a lot of what I'll be presenting about is quite a UK focus, but I think a lot of it is very transferable and relevant wherever you are in the world. This webinar is scheduled for about half an hour, so we will be allowing time for Q&A. And if you have a question, please post it in the question box, and hopefully I will get round to answering it. And also, this presentation will be available to download in the handout box as well after the presentation. So my name's Matthew Lugg. I'm Head of Profession in the Local Government discipline of WSP. My whole background has been working in local government, predominantly with local highway authorities. Then I moved into central government and then into consultancy. WSP is the largest provider of local government engineering consultancy services in the UK. And as I spent most of my career working in local government, I presented papers internationally on asset management, and I was really proud recently to receive a prestigious long time service award by the Highways magazine. So I do hope you enjoyed this webinar this afternoon. So what will I be talking about this afternoon, and what do you need to do to make asset management documents future ready? Well, you'll all be aware we're going through quite transformational change at the moment on a number of fronts, and all these are having a significant impact on our environment, the way we work, on societal and economic issues. So asset management plans that were written maybe 4 or 5 years ago really don't take account of this significant change that we're seeing, and therefore these documents and these processes need to be updated to reflect through a number of the issues, and some of these are listed on this slide here. And I guess the greatest challenge for us is the increasing impact of climate change. And associated with that is the severe weather events that we've been experiencing on a more regular basis, and the greater need for resilience. The need for sustainability and biodiversity and reducing carbon is a consequence of trying to address climate change, and again is a very important issue that we need to be taking into account. And what we've seen as a consequence of sustainability, but also the post-COVID recovery, is a changing use of road space, what here in the UK we talk about as active travel. And again, that has implications about how we manage our highway asset. Technology innovation is transformable as well. You know, we're seeing brilliant innovation in the use of technology, and we need to embrace that in how we manage our systems and processes that support asset management. And then finally, just talking more generally about what we call the new normal, the societal changes with the post-COVID recovery. So I guess there's an awful lot to cover in just a short space of time, and I can't really do that complete justice, but I just hope I can start raise the issues and get you thinking about this. So if we kick off with the implication of climate change, and obviously an important conference is just going on in the UK at the moment, COP26, but actually the UK government first committed to its carbon reduction target by trying to reach net zero by 2050. And what we've seen as a consequence with local authorities in England, that 245 of those have declared climate emergencies and have set themselves more challenging and onerous carbon reduction targets to reduce emissions to net zero by 2030. And if you think about the implications of that is requiring all local authority services, including the local highway service, to contribute to trying to achieve those ambitious targets. So again, these are fundamental changes that we need to take into account in looking at our asset management processes and systems. And just reflecting on the worldwide changes, if anybody had any doubt whatsoever about the impact of climate change, then just look at what these pictures are showing. What we've seen across the world just this year is increasing severity of severe weather events. So, for instance, in Europe, we've seen extreme storms, and the consequences of those, you can see on our highway infrastructure, of this bridge that's been totally demolished by floodwater. And in North America and Africa and other parts of the globe, we've seen extreme heat, and that's having impact on our highway infrastructure, whether it's cracking or buckling of roads. All these things contribute to make us think about increasing resilience of those highway assets. In the UK specifically, we've had new national guidance and policy around trying to look at how we can reduce carbon in transport. So here are two documents that are specific to the UK, but I think the principles are important more widely. And I've put links on these, so if you do want to have a look at these in more detail, then go and see them on the internet. So earlier this year, the UK government produced the Decarbonising Transport Plan, which set out how, in transport terms, it would meet the 2050 net zero target. And there are some incredibly challenging aspects of this around moving from tailpipe emissions of diesel and petrol cars to electric vehicles, to more investment in public transport, which reflects on the other document to the right on your screen, which is Bus Back Better, the national bus policy, but also looking at what we call more active travel, getting people or encouraging people to do more walking and cycling. And if you think about the implications of all of this on the highway infrastructure and the network, then the changing use of the network is a major issue to take into account in the management of that asset. So if you think about active travel, for instance, one of the key things in the UK government's approach, it says on this slide, we will aim to halve all journeys in towns and cities cycled or walked. Just think about the implications of that in a shift, in modal shift, and how different modes are using that highway asset. Again, another useful policy document here for you, which is Gear Change, which is about how the government is going to support the encouragement to more cycling through more investment. And we're already seeing this on our towns and streets, how the highway network is being changed in terms of the space is used for different forms of transport, particularly around walking and cycling, new cycleways, areas of the road in this central slide, which have been cordoned off to highway vehicles in concepts called low traffic neighborhoods. And the importance of this in terms of the highway asset is that this changing use of the infrastructure means that you need to review your hierarchy in terms of your consideration about how these parts of the assets are used, but also in relation to the inspection policy and the management of defects, because clearly the implications of a defect for a motorist, a cyclist and a pedestrian are all going to be different in terms of the level of intervention and how it's dealt with in terms of a priority. The other important aspect of having up-to-date asset management documents is their interaction and relationship with corporate policies. So bear in mind, anyone that works for a local council, you work for a political administration that sets out its objectives through its corporate plan and policies. And what's important in that context is that the asset management documents align to deliver those corporate policies and plans. So this is an example of one council that I've been working with, Bournemouth Christchurch Pool Council, and their new corporate plan sets out these 5 policies: sustainable environment, dynamic places, connected communities, brighter futures and fulfilled lives. And I think many of the local highway authorities, certainly in the UK, will have similar ambitions in terms of what they're looking for. And these are changing in relation to the sort of corporate policies and plans that were used 3 or 4 years ago. And it may be that there's new political administrations that are looking for a change of emphasis in terms of what they want on the highway network. So how do you align the asset management documents to those corporate policies? So here's an example of 2 statements showing the work we've done relating to 2 of those corporate policies that are in the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole asset corporate plan. So looking at sustainable environment, well, the asset management strategy sets out how the council will make best use of resources through effective treatments at the right time, or the use of appropriate technology will minimise the environmental impact of maintenance operations. So what you can see in this statement is the increasing importance of sustainability in these corporate plans, and how the asset management documents need to align themselves to ensure they support the delivery. And similarly with dynamic places, which I won't read out to you now, but you can understand, the point I'm trying to make here, hopefully. So one of the things that WSP did on the back of some work that government went to local authorities with a survey, and we managed to get 10 of our authorities to give us some analysis of the results they gave to government. And these were very useful in relation to looking at the move towards reducing carbon and increasing biodiversity in the way that highway assets are managed. And I'm just going to go through some of those questions just to show you just how local highway authorities in England are gearing themselves up for these new agendas in their preparation, and also some of the issues that are coming out as a consequence. So the first question was in relation to, have you undertaken research into, so I just can't read that, into carbon reduction within highways operations? And the good news was, in terms of this question response, that 100% of all local authorities were already looking at how to reduce carbon reduction. So I think that demonstrates that this is very much being taken account already with UK highway authorities, which is very encouraging. The next question is, do you have a toolkit to use to calculate whole carbon generation as part of your treatment option selection when undertaking life cycle planning and scheme prioritization process? So this question is a bit more of a mixed response, that actually most authorities, probably about 60 or 70%, haven't actually done this yet. So this illustrates there is a need for more guidance and advice to local authorities to enable them to be able to measure and calculate the impact or the carbon reduction that they can generate looking at different scenarios. Another question is, if you were scoring your authority in relation to reducing carbon generation as a result of your maintenance operations, what score would you award on the basis of the below? So there's 3 levels in here. So the first level is, we have an awareness of carbon reduction challenge. So a number of authorities are only at level 1. The vast majority, 75%, are at level 2. So progress is being made. They're developing plans and processes which will enable them to compare whole life carbon generation when selecting suitable maintenance processes. But we haven't reached the 3rd level, and this is where government are looking for further progress, that the plans and processes are fully embedded to ensure least whole life carbon generation when selecting suitable materials and processes. So we're on this journey by the looks of what we're seeing in the feedback of local highway authorities in the UK, but clearly there's more to do in trying to progress this. Have you undertaken research, moving in now to biodiversity, another important aspect of greater sustainability? Have you undertaken research into biodiversity net gain in respect to the management of the highway asset? And again, some reasonably encouraging progress. Probably around 60% of highway authorities are indicating that they have made progress, and there's still quite a large proportion that has still got to move forward on that. This slide's quite busy, so I'll just try and simplify it a bit for you. But again, if you were scoring your authority in relation to the impact that your management of the highway asset has on biodiversity, what score will you award on the basis of the below? So we have an awareness of the impact of our operations on biodiversity and generally seek to limit the consequential loss of natural habitat. So all authorities have moved beyond that level 1. And the good news is that most of them are at level 2. So they've identified particular locations in the asset where we've adjusted operations to improve and protect and preserve biodiversity. And some have moved to the much higher level where they're really looking at biodiversity net gain across the whole asset. So again, a good illustration of some of the aspects and issues that need to be taken into account in making asset management plans future ready, and just how English highway authorities are beginning to progress this agenda on the basis that part of their corporate policies are to reach net zero by 2030. Within the guidance that's available to highway authorities as well, there's other requirements. So we have a code of practice here, which you can go and have a look at. a national code which says the impact of highway infrastructure maintenance activities in terms of the whole carbon life should be taken into account when determining appropriate interventions, materials and treatments. And I think we're beginning to see that happen now within UK highway authorities. And I think the other important aspect of this is about measurement and making sure there are key performance indicators. But what we have identified in this presentation is that local authorities need more advice about the tools that are available to them to help that measurement and that monitoring going forward. And those tools, around those tools, there needs to be standardization. I also wanted to mention the increasing implications of digitization. I am definitely not going to give this subject enough airtime this afternoon. It's such a big issue, but it's so important in the context of looking at transforming asset management systems and processes. The availability of and the cost of data is of an order now that it's much more accessible, and therefore we should be maximizing the benefit of that in terms of the investment decisions we make, whether that's through inventory collection, condition data, or ongoing monitoring. And there's some great systems out there to look at much more live interventions through remote monitoring, for example. But we also need to make sure we manage that data well, and we can, through having it more cloud-based, we can make it more available to more people in the organisation or the public more generally. So again, this is another major aspect of thinking about how asset management can be improved and made future ready. Finally, as I said at the start, I would talk briefly about what we call the new normal. So, what we've seen across the world is a changing patterns of how we live our lives, where we go for services. Certainly during lockdown, many of us were working from home and working very satisfactorily. In fact, some of us were achieving more. So, the question is, why do we need to go back to the offices? And many organizations recognize there has been benefit, and it means that, there's been less commuting, less time wasted in travel. That's not to say that we should be permanently at home, but certainly we've seen that shifting work pattern. And why is that important in terms of the context of this presentation? Well, it means that the traffic patterns on our network are changing. Similarly, the implications to the high street. So, we're doing less shopping by going to high street shops. We're doing that through internet collections, through vans delivering goods to our homes. So, that has also had an impact. And again, that needs to be taken into account in terms of the management of our highway infrastructure and the hierarchy and how we make our investment decisions. Also thinking about wider connectivity and modal shift and the use of those highway networks, which I've already touched on, and actually, where people live and work, and people perhaps moving more out of cities to work remotely. So all these things are aspects of change that need to be considered when you're looking at making your plans, asset management plans, future ready to take into account all of these changes. So in summary, and my concluding tips, as a consequence of some of the things I've talked about this afternoon, and I really haven't gone in much depth, but hopefully it just gives you a context. Look, making these changes is not a quick fix. I think it's something that's going to take a bit of time. There's a danger that people have an imperative just to update their plans, strategies and policies without really thinking about what's fundamentally changed and how to realign them to what's appropriate in terms of the use of that network. I think also we need to think about new expertise. I touched on biodiversity, carbon reduction, something that I didn't study in my engineering degree. There are a lot of skilled people out there who've got the skills that environmentalists, that we want to bring in to help us build and deliver these new documents. As always, stakeholder engagement is crucial. I'd always say this: you can never produce these documents in isolation. You've got to engage and make sure they're fit for purpose. And ideally, they should be long-term. So that's always a challenge because of the funding and uncertainties, but certainly as a consequence of something that happened in the UK fairly recently, what we call the Comprehensive Spending Review, local highway authorities at county level got 3-year indicative funding and the cities got 5 years. So, a minimum of 3 to 5 years, but certainly if you've got better confidence of funding on a long-term basis, then ideally they should be longer. And always to bear in mind, certainly from a local highway perspective, this road infrastructure is overseen by a political organisation. So the politicians must be engaged, they must understand, and they need to sign it off to make sure that their endorsement is given for taking these documents forward. And finally, just something that we've been doing for a number of authorities. We've now done 15 of these, and I did a previous webinar, if you want to go have a look, around undertaking asset management and maturity assessments to help baseline, benchmark, and provide a gap analysis to help further improvements in your processes. So I'm just coming to the end now, but just a quick promotion of the next Snack and Learn webinar, which is in the new year, something to look out for, on key components of robust rail owner-operator operations and maintenance agreement. That's coming from my colleagues in Asia. And all of these webinars are available on the WSP Asset Management global website, which is on this slide here. So if you've enjoyed listening to this one, please take a look at the others. And really just to say thank you very much for listening, and ready to help take questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Matthew, for your presentation. So before moving into the Q&A period, I would like to remind attendees to enter your questions in the question box on the GoToWebinar platform, and also you can download a version of the presentation, a PDF version of the presentation from the handout box on the dashboard. I will start with the first question. When local authorities are already underfunded, how is it going to be affordable to reduce carbon and improve biodiversity?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I think that's something that is really challenging asset managers, certainly in the UK. Ideally, they want to embrace the move towards these solutions. But I think when you sort of drill down and look at some of the aspects of this, you can see actually it is achievable. So if you look at street lighting, for example, where authorities have invested in LED lighting, which has saved energy, therefore it's an investor safe scenario. Not only is it reducing carbon, but it's saving money as well. A similar example I'd give is around the costs of recycling. So it's much cheaper to recycle road materials on site than to dispose of them, and certainly in the UK pay very high costs for landfill. So by recycling you can save money and still achieve the outcomes you need. And just one more example, I guess, in thinking about biodiversity. And by leaving highway verges to revert to natural flora and fauna, you can save on your grass cutting costs. So embracing biodiversity and carbon reduction doesn't always mean that there's going to be an increase in costs. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, how is operations and maintenance considered when alternative materials or products are being used?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Sharon? Sorry.
Sure. How is operations and maintenance considered when alternative materials or products are being used?
Okay, well, I think we've always got to be open to innovation, new ways of working, and new materials. So I think what we want to do is have confidence that if we are going to move to new materials, that not only are they going to reduce carbon, but they're still going to deliver the outcomes. They're still going to be durable and cost effective. So I think we need to analyze the options quite carefully. And ideally, we should be looking at what evidence we've got, whether that's through trials or research from elsewhere, to help us make those decisions.
Thank you. Next question is, what do you see as the greatest changing in the use of highways assets as a consequence of the COVID pandemic?
Okay, again, a very good question. I think it's what I touched on in my presentation, that we're still sort of in the early stages of moving to new normal, but certainly this point about the changing pattern of how road space is being used, the push towards more active travel, cycling and walking, and looking at changing patterns of traffic movement. And all those need to be considered carefully in the way that that asset is managed and prioritized, because priorities can change in terms of classification or hierarchy as a consequence of this changing use. And that then drills right down into the detail about the inspection regime and the management of the defects as a consequence of that changing use.
Thank you. Another question is, are you able to give specific examples of how digitalization can improve the management of highway assets?
Yeah, I touched again on this, but I think one example is around remote monitoring of highway assets. So what we're having the ability to do now, which we haven't been done before, is get real-time information about the condition of assets, which helps us make much quicker proactive responses in terms of intervention. So for instance, street lighting and traffic signals, now you can invest in remote monitoring equipment that can tell you when there are faults on those street lights or traffic signals in real time, which will give you then a much more efficient opportunity to go out and do the repairs. Similarly, around remote monitoring in terms of drainage assets. So sensors now can be put into gullies and also into culverts, so you can monitor in heavy rainfall what's happening, where there may be consequential floods, and it'll give you an early warning of trying to be proactive in dealing with those issues on the network. And then finally, just to mention the use of drones. So increasingly, they're seen as very beneficial in collecting data, but also getting to places where it's quite difficult to access on large structures, for example, to do inspection and surveys of those types of infrastructure. Thanks.
Thank you. We don't have additional questions, so it looks like we're at the end of our webinar session. Please feel free to follow up directly with Matthew via the contact details shown on the screen. And I would like to thank all attendees for joining today. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Matthew, for a fantastic presentation.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, what's left of it. Thank you.